Hi, my name's Elijah, and welcome to my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters. This week, my guest is Kathryn Williams. Kathryn is a much-loved and respected Mercury Award-nominated songwriter. She's also a novelist and an all-round lovely person. We sat down and had a chat about her songwriting process, how she loves to capture life through her creativity, her career so far, what it's like to be a songwriter, and all the little life lessons she's learned along the way. So please enjoy this podcast and subscribe, and thank you very much for listening. Today on my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters, we have Kathryn Williams. Hi, Kathryn, how are you?
Hiya, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Kathryn, I'm a huge fan of your songwriting, and I've been listening a lot the last few days, and I think you're a quintessentially British writer and a bit of a national treasure, if you don't mind me saying so.
Well, I could put that on a t-shirt. That would
Yeah.
be great.
One of the things I really get from your songwriting is a kind of pastoral magnificence and a playfulness and a kind of playful melancholy, but also like an honesty and a bit of an elusiveness at times, where you have these great lines, but your songwriting is very poetic and uses imagery. So I feel like I'm being invited into your universe, in which you're kind of singing your songs about you and your life, but you're also leaving a space which is poetic for me to find my own kind of relationship to your writing. So my first question is, how important is the balance of self-expression and honesty and poetry and imagery for you as a writer?
Well, I mean, I might just lie here and bathe in that beautiful synopsis of my writing. It's always funny hearing back what people think of your writing, because there's none of the quest and the ache and the worry and the unsureness. You know, once something's been made, people are like, "Oh, you always had a plan to do it that way."
Mm,
But every song for me is a surprise and a learning and an edit. But it always starts from a kind of daydream or some sort of filmic idea, where I begin with the seed of something and then get taken along by it on
okay.
the journey.
Yeah.
So I'm never sort of, I'm not one of those writers who's like, I am definitely going to write about this subject and I want to cover tick, 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 tick.
Right.
I mean, when I co-write, which I do more and more all the time, um, it's a different standpoint, because you have to be on the same page of, you know, you have to both own the song, and so
Yeah.
you're describing and trying to explain where you are,
Yeah.
even if that's a dreamlike state.
Yeah.
So a more sort of succinct idea of what the song is when you're writing with someone else, whereas when you're on your own, you can leave things in the mist to unravel and maybe change or swap around, so you do make it ambiguous.
Yeah.
But I don't really have a linear narration or a linear way story path, like a sort of, you know, country song or something. It's often just being inside the film of that particular moment of song.
Beautiful. I actually feel when I listen to you that it is it does feel like I'm in a location, actually. So when you start writing, do you have like an image in mind, like a pictures or imagery in your head? Are you in like a kind of space, like a film space or a kind of location?
Yeah, it's weird, because over the years you have to start sort of explaining yourself or describing things, and it's a strange place to be, because so many years of creation was just, I create. and
Yeah.
I just did it, and there was no sort of explanation or thought process or having to sort of go through the process. But I think after you've been a writer for a lot of years, people want to know process or like how you come towards something.
Yeah.
And I guess that's just a way to sort of deepen the understanding of what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And you know, lots of the times, well, pretty much my whole career, I've never known what the fuck I'm doing, and that's part of the joy. You know,
Absolutely.
everything is like an afterthought. I do know that I'm brave enough or like open enough or vulnerable enough now to say things like that. Say that when I don't know what I'm doing and I do it anyway. Because I think there's a big fear of wanting to be taken seriously or, you know, like not revered, but like kind of thought of as a proper artist or a proper writer or
Yeah.
this or that. And it's all geared towards like, you know, ego and that silly
Yeah.
little voice in your head that's like, what about me? I'm
Mm.
great.
Yeah.
But I just I'm getting more and more free from that. I guess all of my life I've wanted to capture things, whether that's been writing things down in a book, and it always feels like it's been a secret capturing.
Mm.
Like I like to feel like it's just me writing
Mm.
something and no one knows about it.
Yeah.
I get I get sort of colours and visions and tastes with particular chords and words going together. I never really acknowledged that or told anyone about it for a long time.
My process is quite similar to yours, actually, the way you've described it, where I'm not trained, and it's something that I just began writing from 12 and discovered it for myself and did that through, I don't know, just learning other people's songs to some extent, but also like instead of kind of going to technical school or anything like that, I just kind of stuck at my own process of kind of trying to realize what that thing was that was coming through and trying to get out of the way of it really and just allowing it to become something. And I was part of the adventure of the song rather than the me writing it thing. It's never really felt like that for me. Like I can sit down and write a song, and like you said, in collaboration, you sit down to write a song. But for me personally, the process is very much like this thing arrives or happens, and I'm trying to just let it happen. And I know that I'm kind of writing it to some extent, but I really, from my own personal view, think that something's happening which is outside of, you know, craftsmanship or like technique. It's something else which is kind of like a meditative state or a dream state. And I'm trying to just, without being lofty, I'm trying to like channel it and get out of its way and sort of be in relationship with it. Is that the kind of similar thing you're saying?
Well, I know what you mean, and I would love to say that I can get myself out of the way, but the sort of beauty of coming to terms with yourself and your own like niggles and idiosyncrasies is that you can start to know the reasons you're being led one way or another creatively.
Mm,
So you can, I don't know, I feel like creative process for me is in the making and it's in the deciding which way to go and how to fix the puzzle. And that
mm,
ultimately, if it's a practice of your own, is your own way.
yeah.
And I think for so many years I had imposter syndrome because I wasn't trained in music. I couldn't read music. You know, just never thought like a person like me had the right to do it,
Okay.
and was always feeling like the underdog in that respect. And then I don't know, it's happened in the last sort of 5 years, 6 years where I have been writing with artists, and then I got was like, well, I'm writing songs with them, so I must be a songwriter. You know,
Mm,
even though I'd had 15 years of
yeah.
writing songs for myself, it was a sort of acceptance and a admittance and being able to not feel like a dick saying you're a songwriter, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't know.
Was there a moment when you decided to be a songwriter and commit to it as a kind of life path or career path? Was there a a key moment in your younger years when you decided to commit to that?
I think you're confusing me with someone that knew what they were doing.
Okay.
I did an art degree,
Oh, cool.
and in that way, a kind of I always think that an art degree is as much a music degree because
Mm,
you meet all the people who give you the best records to listen to,
yeah,
and then you paint for like 10 hours a day with headphones on.
yeah,
So, you know, it's definitely where I got most of my musical taste from and found out the things that I loved and, you know, had so many listening hours and doing that while visually creating something and making the same decisions
yeah.
that I now make in a songwriting way. It's all interlinked, I think. But
I, I I
I
agree with
just
you.
fell into it. I just fell into music. Yeah.
So were you were writing songs, gigging, I suppose, at the same time as being at art college? Was is
No, not at all. So I
okay,
did my art degree and kept my writing songs a secret.
okay,
And then I was living in a shared house doing some jobs in a vegetarian restaurant
wow,
while being on the dole. Naughty. Hope they don't come and find me. Living hand to mouth. And it was a house of like five with five other people in it. And they heard me singing in my room, and I used to sing really quietly, and they booked me onto a songwriters night,
wow,
and I didn't sleep the night before, but I went and did it, and I sang three songs in this pub,
wow,
and then I got asked to do another one, and on the second one there was someone there from the NME who wrote about me, and
fantastic.
then I made a record. I got asked to London Records, who were part of Warner's at the time, asked me if I wanted anything from them. And I was so green, it was unbelievable. I was like, yeah, I'll have a few songs in the studio if I can own them. So I did that, put some songs from my 4 track and songs from downtime in the studio and put the first album out, Dog
Wow.
Leap Stairs. And then just rolled on to making the second album still on my own label. And back then, there wasn't
No.
any of this Facebook or
Yeah.
Spotify or Instagram or anything. So it was quite unusual to
Mm,
have your own label.
mm.
And then that got nominated for the Mercury, and then things sort of took a different turn because it kind of went brilliant and also shit because
Sure.
I got signed to a major label, but then was just riddled with imposter syndrome and yeah, pissed on all of my chips really. Like, was too scared to go on Jules Holland, was too scared to do all of these things that I was offered to do.
Okay.
It's quite nice knowing now that I was really successful at failure.
Well, it's I guess in a way, I mean, it's is that failure in a way. At least you, I think what's really strong about that is you were being authentic to yourself, by running your own label and actually some maybe saying no to things if you weren't feeling it. Is I think authenticity is quite an important thing in obviously in songwriting, but in who you are as well, because the music industry is obviously a kind of can be a bit of a devil. So it sounds to me like you were maybe in a naive way, possibly, but you were kind of owning your feelings at that point. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was naive, but I also made sure that in the deal with Warner's that it was a licensing agreement and that I would hand the finished album over to them.
Well
So
done.
in no way could they like have their corporate hands on my creation. So it was a weird thing to be part of a big machine, but I was kind of protected in so many ways from being someone that I wasn't. So the authenticity thing
That's a
is
big decision
valid
to make,
for
actually, and to be um sure of, and I respect, more power to you for that, because that's a lot of artists, obviously, and songwriters will quickly get corrupted by the label or managers telling you to write a song a certain way or make a record sound a certain way. And actually, having spoken to lots of different people from all different levels of success, one of the things that comes across, even from the biggest bands I've spoken to, is that they actually want to control their creative process. And some of the people that are world famous and huge global stars actually just want to control their creativity. And some of the people that are less, or aren't as big, if you like, have that creative control, and they seem to be a lot happier and um you know uh purely happy in their making of music, which is the point, right?
yeah, it is the point. I mean, my bank balance is full of authenticity and happiness.
Brilliant.
It's actually it's a fantastic thing to realize in retrospect. Like I think I find joy and humor in the things that obviously weren't for me. Like years ago, I would be bitter and jealous that, people I'd tour with or supported me then went on to huge fame and all of this. And, you can get pulled along by that.
Mm,
Like, why wasn't it me? Or, what, my songs are good. Why aren't they getting on playlists and stuff like that?
mm.
And you just a really nice mantra is if you see someone else doing well, is just to say, wow, that's great, they're having their time.
Yeah.
It just puts everything else to bed. And my friend David Ford, who you should definitely have on this because he's very succinct in his thoughts, he sent me I was moaning at him this morning, and he sent me a text saying that we really need to, for our mental health as artists, we need to separate our input and the output.
Mm.
And I just think that that's such a brilliant way, like creatively, you don't you don't want to be considering people's opinions or what the output will bring to you. All
Yeah.
you need to consider is the making and the doing.
Absolutely true. That's so true, because the thing is, the output's completely out of your control. Even if you could control everything, that's it still would be out of your control because you can't control it. And you're right, the joy of creating, which I really hear that in your records. And as sometimes you can listen to someone, and it feels like they're writing a song, and they're doing this, and it's a presentation, if you like. But when I listen to you, and actually when I read your book, which is fantastic, I'm in your world. And for me, that is the success, is that you've opened up a space as a songwriter to people to soundtrack their lives and be, and invite them to somewhere else, and that's what I get from you as a writer. And I appreciate that isn't always like the thing that pays the bank balance, but it's kind of, that surely is the kind of motivation at the purest level, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, when you were talking about stepping to one side or whatever for the creative process, I think the big thing is to remember that connection is a really big part of it. When you're singing, if you believe it and it has a truth, I don't necessarily, because I'm a writer, it's never always autobiographical or
Mm,
like a diary or anything. There might be seeds of things that I'm thinking about or parts of my life that I want to question and like tease apart. But you have to have enough of you for the truth, and then also remember to step aside so that
Mm.
a connection can be built.
There's a line on your album which is I was listening to last night, which is "Love doesn't change when you leave the stage," and that says, you know, it really struck me because it's what you're saying there about having enough connection to your truth, but there's a space that you leave. For me, I just listened to that. I listened to it about 4 times in a row and just went, I know what she means. What does she mean? But I also know like she's saying something about herself there, but like it was really great because I could just go off into this whole space about what is that she's saying. I know what she's saying. There is like a, you know, I don't know if she's talking to someone personally in her life, or she's talking about the love of playing, or the love you get back from fans, or just the state of being in love. But what I love, it doesn't really matter what the answer is, but what I loved is that that through your process of being connected to yourself, but also kind of leaving a space, you know, I was able to kind of just have this moment. And that's a very generous thing as a writer. And I think your writing is full of that for me, you know, just little questions or observations. Um, there's another track actually, which you talk about the moon being drunk and the earth kind of wanting to go on a one night stand. And you talk
No
about
moon karaoke, yeah.
yeah, it's fantastic. And you have this very playful um way of talking about everybody's happy and I'm just trying to be me and the wind, the clouds are like sheep. Uh, I love the way it feels to me you have like a very good self-awareness of that balance between that poetry and that honesty. And you know, I feel like I can find you as a writer in those words, but there's a really good balance. But it's almost sometimes quite funny as I sense that I can sort of hear you working something out and using imagery and delivering a really beautiful idea, but also being almost funny and playful at the same time. I think that's what I meant earlier about the quintessential British thing in a way. It might be a Liverpool thing maybe, but there's like there's
Yeah,
humor.
or a kinks thing.
I thought of Ray
Like
Davies a lot whilst
yeah,
listening to you.
I mean, I was a massive Kinks fan as an early teenager,
Yeah.
and obviously being from where the Beatles were from, I mean, you know, Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane is just round the corner from my house.
Wow.
And when I was a kid at school, we used to have Beatles songs in with the hymns, and it wasn't until I was much older that I realised they weren't church songs. So, you know, it's like the sort of mesh of what that songwriting was to me was huge. But yeah, I've never really enjoyed the singer songwriter who wants you to think how clever they are.
Hmm.
I'm really not interested in that. And when I feel like I've achieved something, it's not to be thought of that way. It's so that it does exactly what you were saying, that it has it, you know, it can be playful and heartbreaking, like milliseconds apart. And you know, a statement in a lyric shouldn't shouldn't have a black or white yes or no answer. The best bits are when there is this sort of there's a statement, so it's giving you something, but it's the answer is 5 or 10 questions to yourself.
I love
And
that.
that's my excitement. That's
I
my
love that.
excitement to the
I
lyric.
think in the song the Me for You, which is my favorite song on your last record, that I mean that is it's so beautiful. Um it's just one of those tracks which is just like it's got everything you've just said, and it is so hooky and such a great melody, but it does exactly what you said. It asks questions whilst giving you your expression, you know, and I just think that's a very it's actually quite a rare thing, and you do it masterfully well.
Ah, You need to stop now. I'm getting a
Okay, let
big
me
one.
move on to some questions because when you collaborate, because I'm aware that you collaborate a lot with some key people that seem to be part of your kind of team, if you like, but you also collaborate with lots of different writers.
Yeah.
What do you gain from that process as because we've just established you're a very authentic songwriter in your own world as an artist, but when you collaborate with other people, other writers or yeah, other writers, what do you gain from that process? What's great about it and what's the challenge for you?
Well, it's sort of a different. It comes in different guises. So I write for artists for their projects, and then I co-write with people just to co-write, and then I'll co-write for projects. So if I'm writing for someone for them, it's when I first started doing that, I realised that it was a beautiful sort of coming together of my two worlds of being a mother and being a songwriter. So I was able to want the best for them, understand them, and it kind of like work out what their voice is, work out what they want to talk about. Like, so I'd almost be like a secretary. So recently I've just done a co-written album for this big Swedish artist. And, it would all come from the talk, and we'd just talk and talk. And I would write down bits that would come out. So it was part therapy, part secretary,
Mm,
part whatever. And then, we'd start to like circle round the issues that would be coming back or saying, well, what do you want to write about? And then it's just about making it authentic for them, like making the words fit their voice, making it feel like the rhythms suit who they are. So
mm,
it's a tailoring process, and it's
yeah,
exciting,
yeah.
and it's really good fun.
Is it ever challenging as
With personalities,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
because ultimately, sometimes you're working with, big stars who, unfortunately for them, are mostly surrounded by people who are on the payroll and nobody wants to say no to them.
right.
So they can be a bit tantrumy, or they
Okay.
can be a bit like ego-y.
Yeah,
But it's trying to find the best of them within that and show them that the creative process is the joy.
yeah. So I was going to ask you, how often do you write songs? Is it a daily thing?
Uh, um, I'm always putting things either into my notes in my phone, or I carry a little thing with me, but it's never a song. It's just observations or things that have sort of tweaked my interest, and that could just be like going to the beach and then seeing an old couple helping each other up the stairs. And I write, Whitby, an old couple helping each other up the stairs. And
Okay.
then that might trigger something on later, or I'll get sort of a really good line that has a perfect weight in its rhyme, and
Yeah.
I'll write that down. And then other times I'll come in the studio on my own and I'll sit and write 4 or 5 songs in a day,
Well,
or I'll write 4 and 5 songs with a friend, or I'll come to the end of 2 weeks and I won't have written anything. There's no, you know, I'm not particularly a creature of habit, apart from the fact that I will capture as often as I can. And that
brilliant.
might be a poem, or it might be the book, or it might be some painting or drawing or sketching. I think I'll always have the capturing as part of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Your book is wonderful, and you've collaborated with Laura Barton, the music journalist and writer, and also you've written songs. You were commissioned to write songs on from Sylvia Plath's work. Um, writing and is writing's obviously very dear to you, but is how important is reading to you as a songwriter? Is that an important thing?
Yeah, I think reading is more important to me than listening to music. I think when I'm in the creative process of making a record, I have to be really select of what I want to listen to, because
Mm,
I don't want to sully the sort of process of melody that I'm working on.
yeah,
Whereas with writing, it's always, especially poetry as I've got older, it's that sort of honing your writing skill by being humbled by other people's brilliance. That's
yeah,
really important to me now.
yeah. Okay, yeah. You actually said something in your biography about the things that influence you aren't necessarily going to come out in obvious ways unless you're trying to copy. I don't sound like Lou Reed or Tom Waits, but when I listen to them, I learn. That's a really eloquent way of saying what you just said there as well about being humbled by someone else's talent and learning from the way they write as a songwriter or a writer. And I really like the way you put that into words there because I think you can do a lot of these days. There's a lot of kids doing songwriting courses, which is great. They weren't around when I was growing up, and when you were growing up, we just had like records and words.
Yeah.
And when I'm personally asked like, how do you write a song? If someone hasn't written a song before, I'm like, well, just go and listen to all the people that you think or you've heard are great. Go and invest your some time and money into listening to them and read as much as possible. Um, so do you, when you listen and read other people, you're studying and learning from them and having that osmosis kind of effect on your writing that it impacts your creativity that way through kind of picking up things they're doing. Is that how you'd explain that?
Yeah, being sort of they say, don't they, that like a really good thing to have in your life is wonder. So like the first week of January, I always go to the beach or go for a walk in the woods or go somewhere where everything is bigger than me and experience wonder, like a kid. And I think that that's the magic that helps you have a joy of creating, because you know that there's things yet to discover.
Hmm.
And God forbid I ever come to the point of teaching or tutoring where I think I've got loads to tell. I've got loads to teach you, because I am not that person. And,
Hmm.
when I tutor at Arvon or whatever, the, the biggest thing that I think is my responsibility is creating a safe environment where people aren't scared of failure so that they can be playful.
Yeah.
And it's in the being playful and the recognizing that a mistake is just another turn towards where you're wanting to go.
Yeah.
People are so scared. I mean, I know that I'm coming from the point of view of that was me.
Yeah.
Scared of making mistakes, scared of shame, fear of not being good enough, and all of those things, when actually, like, it's not life or death writing a song. You can write a song, throw it in the bin, and the day will still continue. But in the same point that you sort of have to have that lightness of touch of this is not the most important thing in the world,
Mm, mm,
it also is the most
yeah.
important thing in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, I guess I don't know. It's hard to put into words sometimes, but my favorite thing is being on my own, writing something in my book and playing around, and then laughing uncontrollably at the fact that it's either brilliant or it's shit or both, and whether or not I'm going to share that. And
Uh,
that's kind of, for me, it's like the jumping out of an aeroplane. I'm a fearful little small creature who doesn't like big crowds, and my adrenaline rush is like writing words in a book and putting that to music. And
yeah,
then I would say the second best thing is doing that process and having those same feels and laughs and vulnerabilities and joy, but doing that with another songwriter and
mm,
sharing that
mm.
process.
Beautiful. When you finish your own song, so not in collaboration, but when you've had that moment and you're on your own in your room and doing your favorite thing, do you ever play your songs to someone else to kind of get their response, or do you have someone to go to check if the song is like of value to another, or do you just rely upon your own instincts when you pick the songs for records?
I have a few people that I will send voice memos to that I know it's more in the sending it that makes it concrete.
Yeah,
And I know that they're kind and gentle enough to, if they like it, then that's great. And if they don't like it, it won't discourage me.
yeah,
Um, and I've had it quite a few times. I mean, so like Chime Like a Bell, I had that song written with this guy, Matt Dayton, for quite a while. And I'd played it to a few people and they were like, oh, yeah, it's great, it's great. And, but in my head, I was like, well, you obviously don't get it because I know that this is really, really good. And there is that kind of like steely core in me that
yeah,
if I know something is good
yeah,
and nobody else has recognized it, it it won't discourage me
yeah,
from knowing that that's good.
yeah,
And I think that that's a really important thing to cultivate. It's
yeah,
not about like thinking you're fucking brilliant all the time or whatever, but to cultivate a sort of knowing of what you like. And that's with other musicians as well.
yeah,
Like loads of the artists who are my favorite artists have not had the recognition that I think they deserve,
yeah,
but I know how good they are,
yeah,
and I don't need popularism or you know a a music writer to tell me that something's good. I think there's too many people who don't really know if they think something is good or not and need to be told.
yeah,
And I really mistrust that. It's the only time when I you see, I really mistrust people who have no doubts and who are completely sure of themselves.
yeah,
I I used to think like there was something wrong with me if I sat on the fence and couldn't have a necessary decision about something, and I
mm.
thought that there was something lacking with me. But I think people that come to quick judgment are either psychopaths or presidents.
I,
Um, it's like lots of people decide that they're going to show strength by having an opinion without really going into depths of it. But knowing how you feel and how something reacts within you in an emotional way, which is where songs should always come from, you should hone that. And you don't have to know why you like it, but you can go, this is right for me, this is
yeah,
good for me, this speaks to me. So I think that that's the best thing when it comes to choosing the songs that you want to represent you.
yeah,
Because we all write way more songs than we're ever putting out,
yeah,
and it's that sort of terrible kill your children kind of position where you
mm,
need to you need to work out why this song can be on a record and this one can't. It's like I think it's as much about the editing of what you want heard.
Yeah, I think you've hit some really great stuff there because one of the things that I think is the most important thing to develop as a songwriter, and it's clear to me before you even just said that you've done that, is to know what you like, and it doesn't matter what other people think, and to know, it might be, for example, it's just coming to my head. There's a song by a band called Octopus that were like this band in the, I don't know, Britpop era, and they released a song called Your Smile, and for some reason that song just really resonated with me. For some reason, I've never listened to anything else they've done, and I think they just split up like pretty soon afterwards. But to me, that song is like one of the greatest songs ever written, and I don't even know why. But then what you're saying is you can have those moments about songs and then wonder, or a film, or knowing what you don't like is equally as important, because what you're doing is developing your sense of a voice, as of a songwriter, of an artist. And that's really nothing that you can be taught other than you listening to your reactions and instincts about things, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just about, yeah, your instinct is it more than knowing your voice, because that's like a tricky one, because that's sort of, I was thinking about this and the idea of like idols and like people who come to your gigs and who believe you're a much better version of you than you actually are, and then you can get enamored by the idea of people thinking of you as much better than you are.
Mm,
So
mm,
so like finding that voice, I think if you're looking for a voice, it can often lead to that idea of what you think other people think you are.
mm.
Whereas the vulnerability kind of thing, cracking open your rib cage and letting people poke around at the soft center of you is painful, but it's a really good way to have a superpower. I think all these years of my not feeling good enough, or like phobias, agrophobias, and like imposter syndromes and things like that. I think I was always trying to hide my vulnerability,
Right.
and that's where the fear came in. And then when I realized that part of showing that vulnerability was actually how to connect,
Yeah.
then it became my superpower.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to put that. I think, you spoke about the imposter syndrome, but when you got nominated for the Mercury Music Prize, which is hugely brilliant and something that many songwriters would love to have happen to them, did that nomination and that time of your life, did it make you believe in yourself as a writer, or do you sort of, I'm picking up the idea that it made you feel like, I'm not necessarily that made you feel like an imposter, but obviously you got acclaim and praise and seen and validation and all that kind of thing. But as a writer, how did that kind of, was it more pressure, or how did it help you? Or
I mean, the brilliant thing about the Mercury is, I mean, it happened 23 years ago, and yet I'm still considered a Mercury Music Prize
mm, mm,
nominee, which, so I think that that'll be tattooed on my career forever. And it kind of meant everything and nothing. I didn't win it. I found out from three of the judges that I was 2 points away from winning it from Badly
wow.
Drawn Boy. So I don't know how I feel about that. But I mean, it was all kind of a dream, really. And that's how I got my publishing deal and my record deal and met lots of people. And it was kind of like a Cinderella story. But I think a big thing of careers in hindsight is that when you start off in music and you get to like a sort of level like that, like an award or something, or I was flavor of the month for a long time
Mm,
around that and was written about a lot, and you think that that's like the first step to go further.
right.
And I think a lot of people feel like that with their careers.
Sure.
They're like, oh, I got this Mercury thing and second album and I'm on this, where am I going to be in 5 years? I'm going to be right up there. And the realization that any sort of creative career is about managing a steady decline. And, like the slow air coming out of balloon, if you can do that gracefully, if you can navigate a decline gracefully with maybe having sort of moments where you're lifted back up in the air again, then, and you can concentrate on just carrying on and creating, and for the quest to be making better things each time, regardless of how they're received, then I think that's the way you can stay sane in this business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, also, I mean, that your new record sounds as fresh and full of life and enthusiasm and secret corridors and magical kind of days on your own outside in the woods, all of that stuff, of which was there from the beginning in your career, is there now, and in some ways is even more cinematic. I think it's still there, and it's still you, and that's the success, I think.
Yeah, well, also, I would say with the new record that a massive part of the cinemascope and the audio brilliance is all down to Ed Harcourt, who produced it,
Yeah,
and I work with really closely and collaborate with. And you build these bonds and trust, and freely give away like power to people you trust,
yeah,
knowing that they're going to come up with something brilliant,
yeah,
and you don't take all the credit for it.
yeah,
I would happily say that that record has got my name on it, but it should have me and Ed. I would say that he takes, so much of the credit for the way it sounds and has those soundscapes. And equally, like that record is, I think there's more co writes on that record than any record I've had before.
right,
And it's a joy to share it.
yeah, yeah.
And it's freeing to think, I don't want to take all the credit for this.
You sound like you're very, in a really great place as a person and as a writer, and very kind of, you know, your journey has led you to what seems to be a very kind of zen-like place in your understanding of what you are as a writer, and your career, and the reason why you write. It's refreshing to hear that.
Well, I think I think that's true. I think I am in a good place, but I think a lot of that is giving things away, like becoming a tutor at Arvon and doing co-writing, and just realizing that everything isn't all about you. It's like
Mm,
when you have kids and you
yeah,
suddenly like, oh my God, where did all my time go?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
had all this time and now I have none. But and it's also, I don't know how many records or songs I've got in me, so I have to see the magic of it.
yeah,
I go to gigs now and I'm in sort of rapture of being at an event that is a one-off event that'll never happen again. Even if people are on tour, they're not going to play those songs in the same way. And I think my head had been sort of sullied with the Spotify thing, not so much the money side, but like the idea that everything had playlists and titles,
mm,
and I'd already fallen down the back of the sofa by not being folk enough, or not being rock enough, or not
right,
being cool enough or
yeah,
alternative, but all of those things, which is why I loved it when you said that I was quintessentially English, and you talked about the Kinks, because I kind of feel like the Kinks and the Beatles and Velvet Underground and those sort of like artists who aren't necessarily inside a genre, or feel free enough to dip in and out of different genres without needing to qualify themselves.
Yeah,
That's where I want to sit, but it doesn't mean that you can't get on playlists for this or that, or you can't be part of a gang. So I've kind of created my own gang of songwriters, and we help each other out.
I think you actually hit something there. Maybe I'm picking up. It's the Spotify thing is a bit of a. I know what you mean. The playlist thing is a bit of a new kind of obstacle to kind of make you feel bad as a songwriter in some way. Like trying to fit yourself into playlists. Like I went through that of trying to. Well, what are we? And I just in the end thought, well, if something ever gets playlisted in a big playlist, fine. But like I'm not going to kind of try and sort that out. They're much more interested in the next song or the next record, and like those people you spoke about, I don't think they would have um changed what they were doing to fit a Spotify playlist either. I think they'd have followed their instinct and written the next song which comes up, and then the next song that comes up, like dominoes,
Yeah.
and just that's something to remember. I think sometimes in the age of playlisting and songs that have 90 billion plays and all this kind of stuff, it's like, well, there's a long line of songwriters who have had all degrees of success, but actually, if they're committed to the art and the process, they'll find their audience and find their way.
Yeah, it's like David said, the input and the
Yeah,
output.
yeah. Let me ask you a few final questions. If you could suggest a songwriter to aspiring songwriters or just to songwriters in general who you love, whether they're kind of hugely famous or not, who would you suggest people listen to, writers that you love?
Um, I think Devon Sproul is one of my. Devon Sproul and Laura Viers are two of my favourite songwriters, women making music right now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a song by my friend Polly, who's on the same label as me, on her new album called Snakeskin, which I just think is a perfect song. It's written about her being with her father when he dies, but that sounds heavy and deep, and it is, but it's it just takes a different turn,
Mm,
and I found that a song that I've gone back to a lot, and I really like the sort of dreaminess of Big Thief, the band Big Thief. I like that it it feels like a waking dream when you listen to them. But
beautiful.
yeah, I learn things all the time from listening. And at the moment, because I'm in between records, I'm doing a lot of musical listening. Um, so that's good fun.
Excellent. Good recommendations there. Is there or two questions. Do you have a favorite song that you've written? Do you have a song which like is the one that you kind of feel like you nailed whatever it is you're looking to nail? Is there a favorite song of yours or
Um, there's two songs that are coming on the new album that I've been playing a lot, which I feel like I've managed to like get to the top of the cliff on.
awesome?
Um, so I'm excited about that. It's hard for me with older songs because I often feel that it's like looking back and sort of not recognizing the person
Mm,
of them, you know?
yeah, I
Like
do.
even my voice, like younger, and not to say that they're not as good, you know, most people think that I've only ever written one album, and that was the Mercury one, and that was the best. And I've got lots of artists, you know, like Van Morrison, where I only ever listen to Astral Weeks for
Yeah,
him, you know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I can understand all of that. But yeah, I feel like there's a lyric from Mirrorball, which was on the third album, and there's a line from that which I keep coming back to that I feel like I nailed my life in, which the line is I was searching for something divine and ended up making the mundane into my shrine. And
Nice.
and I guess that's like the yin and yang of my life.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. Going back to that wonder that you're looking for, if you can find that wonder in the small, it's really interesting to hear you say that actually, because I think that's very apparent on your records. That's manifesto, if you like, in that line is it's there, and in your book actually, like there's like small things and kind of little experiences. And when we wrote together, actually, there's a line that you came up with, which was it isn't what it was before. And I remember just going, yes, that is exactly the right thing. But it's like so elusive. And these little moments sometimes in life are quite elusive. And you don't know why you're suddenly got this melancholy for this moment you had when you were a kid with the sun in the woods when you found something. All those little moments. I always feel like your songs are full of those moments and then kind of glorified, if you like, through melody and song.
What you mentioned then about the small things, I do think that that detail is what helps truth sing.
Mm,
And like, that pop songs have a lot of common ground and popularism for like to have an openness enough for a large audience.
yeah,
But I do think that if you can focus right down onto the detail of something, it makes people believe it's true.
that's brilliant. It's great advice to any writers out there. That's a very good idea because an anthemic chorus, which is big and open and has sentiments in it, is one thing, but to approach writing in that way with detail is a different kind of way in, but equally, if not more valuable in some ways. Okay, Catherine, thank you for your time. But let me ask you one last question. And this is a question which is probably the answer might change from day to day or minute to minute. But if you could have written any song other than your own work, what song would that be here and now today?
Um, mm, maybe like a bird on a wire, Leonard Cohen, or Paul Simon. I'm just so heavily into at the moment. I grew
Mm,
up with him, and the more and more I dive into him, the more he's managed to make whole paperback novels in 3 minutes with his lyrics.
yeah,
So I yeah, maybe American Tune by him.
useful. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And what's coming up for you at the moment then? Where can people kind of expect to see you pop up next or find your next work?
I,
And
I've got like a Radio 2 thing on at the moment, with a song me and Chris Difford wrote for this Sunderland Foy boatman.
brilliant.
And I'm making my new album in the next couple of months, which is going to be very small as I can make it. And I'm writing an album with Withered Hand, Dan Wilson. I'm writing with Paul Weller. I'm writing with Matt Dayton. I'm writing with Chris Difford. I'm writing with Michelle Stoddart. Yeah, lots of writing.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like the most wonderful life you have going on there. That's amazing.
Yeah, but
Brilliant.
now I'm just going to go and clean the toilet.
That's brilliant. I'm gonna go back in the floor. So that's the two of us of yeah, gonna go and write a song whilst consider songwriting whilst vacuuming. Small things, everyday things. I love that. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's a
Lovely
pleasure. Good luck with
conversation.
it all.
Thank you. Thank you.